Hi, I'm Amy Webb. I'm a futurist and an award-winning author. I'm a professor of strategic foresight at the NYU Stern School of Business and the founder of the Future Today Institute. Today, we're going to be reviewing some scenes from movies that are set in the future. So I get a lot of questions about my job. What's a futurist? A futurist is somebody who methodically explores signals and data in order to anticipate what might come next. We don't predict the future, but we certainly track everything that's happening in the present and try to imagine what might be next. This is Blade Runner 2049, directed by Denis Villeneuve.
Officer K, D6-3.7. Let's begin. Ready?
Yes, sir.
In the science fiction canon, this is kind of a sacred text. So this movie, Blade Runner 2049, and the previous version, Blade Runner, comes from a story written by Philip K. Dick, who's a super genius in the world of science fiction and futures work. So what's happening during this scene is that he's taking a psychological test, but the psychological test is actually looking to see whether there's corruption in his system, not to tell whether or not he's human. And that's kind of important because within artificial intelligence, the test to tell whether or not somebody is human has always been about deception. Can the human tell whether or not the machine is human? But in this case, this test is about proving that the machine is in fact a machine and not human.
Cells.
Cells.
Have you ever been in an institution? Cells.
Cells.
Do they keep you in a cell? Cells.
Cells.
When we think about artificial intelligence, and Blade Runner is all about self-aware AI, we tend to anthropomorphize it. So we tend to put that AI inside of a human container, right, a body. And then the rest of the story is, what does it mean to interact with somebody who feels human but isn't? The porous boundaries between humans and machines. But at the end of the day, we're already surrounded by meaningful artificial intelligence, and sometimes that AI goes rogue, and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, in a way, even without the flying cars and always nighttime raining situation, we're sort of living bits and pieces of Blade Runner in our everyday lives. We just don't recognize that that's what's happening. This is Gattaca, directed by Andrew Nichols. It's the story of a society in which genetic manipulation is commonplace, and people are in a constant quest to build their perfect children.
I'll never understand what possessed my mother to put her faith in God's hands rather than those of her local geneticist. 10 fingers, 10 toes. That's all that used to matter.
So what's so interesting about this movie is that when it came out in 1997, there were a ton of movies about aliens. And in this movie, it's also kind of about aliens. It's just that the aliens are the natural-born humans. Because in this future world, anybody who hasn't been edited is the mutant versus the other way around. So this movie is all about the future of genetic engineering. And it wasn't too long before this, some of you might remember Dolly the sheep. So Dolly the sheep was a cloned animal, and it caused this absolute manic furor all around the world. People were really upset that scientists had figured out and had advanced the science enough to genetically not just modify, but copy another living being, and that it was actually born. I mean, this freaked everybody out. The Pope made a special edict. President Clinton had to have a break-in, with a press conference, and reassure the American public that, don't worry, clones are not going to be just roaming around the streets outside. So in the middle of all this comes this incredible movie, Gattaca.
Neurological condition, 60% probability. Manic depression, 42% probability. Attention deficit disorder, 89% probability. Heart disorder, 99% probability. Early fatal potential. Life expectancy, 30.2 years.
30 years.
in this future world, there's a biological case system that exists, and people are slotted into different professions based on their genetic makeup. What's interesting is that we're kind of in a situation now that's reminiscent of what was in that movie. We're going to be entering a period in human history where there will be people who are vaccinated for the coronavirus and people who are not, for various different reasons. And that's going to create biological levels, different sets of permissions throughout all of our societies, all around the world, that don't really have as much to do with all of the traditional ways that we've sorted people in the past, like based on their education or their wealth. It's a new type of biological system of sorting and tagging people, which is profound if you stop and think about it. This is The Matrix, directed by the Wachowskis, one of my favorite movies, and in this scene, Neo wakes up. Two things you need to know about The Matrix. One, it is an incredibly clever story about artificial intelligence and control. Two, it is a metaphor. It's a very clever, incredibly well-told metaphor. So no, I don't think that artificial superintelligence is at some point in the future going to give birth to humans and force us to be batteries, which is what's happening in that scene. The amazing story that's being told is that it's our data that power the systems. And in that amazing scene where Neo is waking up, right? He's taken the pill, he's decided to learn more and to be disconnected from the system. The story that's being told there is he now understands what data are being collected and how the algorithms manipulate people. This movie was brilliant and ahead of its time because what's happening right now in American society and other places around the world is that we are waking up. People do recognize how the big tech giants are harvesting and scraping and mining and refining their data. At some point in the future, yes, there are generative algorithms, there are evolutionary algorithms, and at some point they may decide to do things that we didn't intend. But the story that's being told here is about what happens when we cede control to algorithms, to systems designed by other people for the purpose of rewarding us, nudging us, and getting us to do what they want. Here's a crazy little factoid. Some researchers a couple of years ago at Carnegie Mellon University calculated that it would take 76 workdays to read through all of the privacy agreements and all of the terms of service agreements the average person sees in a year. None of us read any of that, myself included. I mean, who has the time? But what this means is we humans are slowly going to sleep, just as the machines are starting to wake up. Which is my way of saying we rely more and more on automated systems that power our everyday lives, and we are more and more disconnected from them. We don't understand how they work. And so when you find out that persistent biometric surveillance systems are everywhere in your city, or that drones that you can neither see nor hear have been flying around overhead taking pictures of you at a protest, or that simply by doing a little bit of online shopping, there's a rich profile of what are called personally identifiable information markers, or PIIs, about you that divulge an incredible amount of information to third parties that you may never know or see. And that entire connected system of data and algorithms are built to try to make decisions for you. I mean, that is not the future, people. That is like right now. Part of what we're being asked to contemplate in the Matrix is, are we in a simulation, or can we see what's happening? I mean, it's brilliant. This movie, The Matrix, about artificial intelligence and supercomputers, and also a post-apocalyptic environmental crisis, is just great. Just great. If you have not seen this movie, I got nothing to say to you beyond what I've already said. This is Ex Machina, directed by Alex Garland. And in this clip, Nathan explains how he created Ava, the AI.
If you knew the trouble I had getting an AI to read and duplicate facial expressions. You know how I cracked it?
I don't know how you did any of this.
Every cell phone, just about, has a microphone, camera, and a means to transmit data. So I turned on every microphone and camera across the entire fucking planet.
No.
And I redirected the data through Blue Book. Boom. Limitless resource of vocal and facial interaction.
You hacked the world's cell phones?
Yeah, and all the manufacturers knew I was doing it too.
Couple of thoughts here. That whole thing about a single entity pulling the entire world's worth of cellular data into one spot, and then I guess having some kind of crazy, powerful algorithmic system to parse it all, that's not a thing. The number of cell phones exceeds the number of people, and it's not just cellular devices. I mean, cell phones divulge your location, among other things, but we're all connected to many different systems and tools. So if I was going to try to build a high-functioning AI system, there's other ways to do it.
Here, we have her mind. Structured gel. I had to get away from circuitry. I needed something that could arrange and rearrange on a molecular level, but keep its form when required. Holding for memories, shifting for thoughts.
This is your hardware?
Wetware.
You hear them talking about something called wetware. Wetware is actually a real thing. One way to think about people is that we are just soft robots. We're just containers for code. And the squishy computer inside of our heads, our brains, are what make us work. So this concept of wetware, totally on point. And it turns out that theoretical chemists have created molecules that can work as what are called qubits. So in regular computing, we have bits and bytes, and in quantum computing, we have these things called qubits. So what he's describing in that scene when he pulls the synthesized brain out of its, of course, stainless steel container, what he's talking about is combining sort of quantum and AI. So there is something there that does kind of make sense. This is WALL-E, directed by Andrew Stanton.
I have it all morning, so let's hover over to the driving range and hit a few virtual balls in space.
Nah, we did that yesterday. I don't want to do that.
Well, then what do you want to do?
I don't know. Something.
Wow. So WALL-E tells the story of an environmental disaster, and humanity has had to leave Earth. But the rest of the story is much more about capitalism and the free market economy run amok. People who are irreversibly distracted, who need devices servicing them at all times. And really, people have lost touch with each other. Their relationship is with screens and sort of robots that do things with them versus each other. In a way, the reason that I love this movie so much is because it feels so plausible. Of all the movies and television shows that have been made about the future, in a way, WALL-E feels very real. First of all, there are a service class of robots that are working collaboratively today. So for the past, 10, 15 years, researchers have been building out service bots that never really found a market or had a use case. There's a company called Savioke that has this little robot that sort of roams around and can make deliveries. So let's say that you're a hotel, you could shove little soaps and towels, and then if you call housekeeping, rather than having a person come to you, a robot would come to you. That's not too far off from what we just saw in that clip. The world is full of service bots right now, and a lot of them listen, make our lives easier in some ways. But there's another piece of this movie which has to do with humans kind of giving up and allowing automation to take over.
Hey, drink the bus. Here, take the cup. Hey, take the cup.
I don't know if in the future we're all going to have a levitating chair. I don't know that that's necessarily on the horizon. But there is something to the idea that we expect technology to do things for us that we ourselves are probably still capable of doing. And, there's also the scene where Wall-E speeds up to one of the passengers on the levitating train, and he's trying to get her attention. And she's been talking on the phone and looking at multiple screens, and Wall-E kind of snaps her out of it, and that screen goes away. And she suddenly realizes, oh, there's like a whole world out there. It's literally passing before my eyes that I kind of forgot about, or maybe I didn't know existed. I mean, doesn't that kind of describe a lot of people or kids who spend a lot of their days constantly plugged into devices? So that to me feels like a somewhat plausible future. This is 2001: A Space Odyssey, directed by Stanley Kubrick. And in this scene, we learn that Hal is always watching.
There's never been any instance at all of a computer error occurring in the 9000 series, has there?
None whatsoever, Frank. The 9000 series has a perfect operational record.
Well, of course, I know all the wonderful achievements of the 9000 series, but are you certain there's never been any case of even the most insignificant computer error?
None whatsoever, Frank. Quite honestly, I wouldn't worry myself about that.
2001: A Space Odyssey is about artificial intelligence that at some point is powerful enough that it makes decisions that the humans on board would themselves not make. And then catastrophe ensues. Stanley Kubrick had the vision and the desire and the drive to tell a story about both space and artificial intelligence. And in order to make 2001: A Space Odyssey, he brought on board lots of different experts, one of whom was Marvin Minsky, who actually coined the phrase artificial intelligence. He was part of this group of people that were advising on the film that were trying to think through an AI system powering the systems for that ship that they were writing. Like, what would all of that look like? There's so much interesting about this movie, and I realize that it's kind of slow by today's standards, but you've got a bunch. So there's persistent surveillance, and you've got a supercomputer system that is making decisions, but is also meant to be subservient to the humans, in this case, the people who are on the ship.
Another thing just occurred to me. Well, as far as I know, no 9000 computers have been disconnected.
Well, no 9000 computers ever fouled up before.
That's not what I mean. Well, I'm not so sure what do you think about it.
Let me blow your mind for a moment. So one of the things that you see happening is that there's something called computer vision that's being used to interpret what's being said in the pod. The pod may not have listening devices, but it doesn't mean that the thing isn't riddled with sensors. The computer, HAL, doesn't need audio content to understand what's being said. Now, out in the real world, we're totally headed into a future in which machines don't need just audio or just our faces to recognize who we are and what we're saying and what we're meaning. We've actually built systems already that can recognize who you are and how you might be feeling by monitoring your posture and your gait. We're all kind of obsessed with machines and cameras looking at our faces, but truth be told, I don't need your face to know who you are. So to answer the question, because everybody's thinking it, at what point in AI's development do we wind up with a supercomputer like HAL that starts making its own decisions and potentially puts us in harm's way? And the answer to that question is exactly what date? That I don't know. Are we building a situation in which that could happen in the future? Yeah. There are lots of different research groups around the world that are building AI systems that are intended to learn on their own without having a human in the loop. Some of these systems don't just complete sort of a single narrow task, which would be called artificial narrow intelligence. They're actually capable of doing many more things at once. and they've started to make decisions that humans would not make. So there's this research group called DeepMind, and they've been working on a computer system and training it on how to play Go, an ancient game that was played in China and Japan. It's got white and black pieces on a giant grid. And what's interesting about this game is you can't brute force your way through all of the mathematical calculations. The rules are a little different. So this DeepMind team builds this system called AlphaGo and has different iterations of that system. And over time, this thing beats every human Go master that is willing to play it. I mean, it's like bad. None of the humans can beat the system. And at some point, it wasn't just that the system outmaneuvered because it understood and could sort of calculate all the different plays. The reason that the system kept winning was because it learned the human strategy and then decided to throw it out. And it invented its own strategy and started using it and played in a way that nobody had ever seen before. And that, quite frankly, on the back end, it was doing this in a way that people didn't quite understand. So we are already in a situation where machines are starting to make their own decisions. Doesn't necessarily mean that the future turns out bad for the humans, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it doesn't not turn out bad for the humans. This is Total Recall, directed by Paul Verhoeven. And in this scene, we learn a little bit about the technology that powers the perfect vacation.
Would you like to ski Antarctica, but you're snowed under with work? Do you dream of a vacation at the bottom of the ocean, but you can't float the bill? Have you always wanted to climb the mountains of Mars, but now you're over the hill? Then come to Recall Incorporated, where you can buy the memory of your ideal vacation cheaper, safer, and better than the real thing. So don't let life pass you by. Call Recall for the memory of a lifetime.
What's really interesting is the use of what's called synthetic media. So a lot of this movie is all about storing memories, creating memories, implanting memories, erasing memories, using a variety of different types of technology like AR and virtual reality. But part of what powers that is something called synthetic media. So this is like using the data from everyday life and generating realistic looking people and characters. We're at the very, very beginning stages of that right now. So there's like all different pieces of this ecosystem currently being built. And that's what makes Total Recall so fascinating. Because when I first watched it in 1990, I was like, oh, this is another great Philip K. Dick story. This is a great movie. And here we are, like 20 years later, and some of the crazy futuristic world that's being described there is actually now being built. There's a lot of virtual reality that's being used. Something that a lot of people don't know is that VR was kind of invented to help treat people with PTSD. And the idea is you put on an immersive headset, and headphones, and whatever that traumatic experience that you might have gone through. In a virtual reality environment, doctors treat PTSD using exposure therapy or trying to sort of confront the memory or change the memory. So this sort of idea of using all of these technologies to change or implant memories in people has a basis in the real world. So it's really interesting, right? To think about a future in which you don't strap into a headset in a VR environment to escape your past, but couldn't you also, if you were exposed enough times, start to alter your own reality? There's definitely stuff in Total Recall that is totally plausible in the future. Everything from taking virtual vacations and actually feeling like you were there, to having a new kind of therapy to potentially like erase or at least mute old memories, even enhancing your loved ones, the VR version, the Hollywood version of your spouse. That is plausible. That could actually happen. And maybe your thing is younger Arnold Schwarzenegger. Like, that's a possibility. So in all of these clips that we've seen, you're looking at the future. But these depictions of the future are actually based in all of the signals that are being collected in the present, which means that, filmmakers and showrunners do work that's pretty similar to the work that I do. We look at the signals, we think about their next order outcomes, and we imagine alternative futures. And we ask, what if, and if this is what we're seeing, then what next?